Pleased to welcome in our co-hosts on this fine day, New York Times best-selling author John Gilstrap. Mr. Gilstrap.
Good morning.
And he is the proprietor of this said establishment, Delegate Michael Hornby. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Rob. Good morning, John.
So anything new in your
Interesting
world?
day.
Anything happen unusual in your day lately?
Extremely eventful few days. Let's just put it that way. Yesterday was crazy.
Yesterday was indeed very crazy. Delegate-elect Joe DeSoto from the 91st was arraigned, and John, the official charge, terroristic threats
won, according to the arrest document.
This involved threats made toward members of the House of Delegates. Some were specifically named, and these are all, of course, alleged charges, as no convictions have been made. We understand that sometime this morning the arraignment will take place, and at that point we'll find out if there is bail or what have you. And we'll have more details on this as the morning goes along here, and more information is made available after the 9 o'clock hour. I want to welcome in another delegate right now, Adam Burkhammer from the 64th. He joins us via telephone. And Delegate Burkhammer has been on the program before. We're pleased to welcome him back. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, guys, good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be back on the show.
Yeah, great to have you with us. You are directly involved in the foster care situation in West Virginia, Adam, and have fostered several children yourself, correct?
Yeah, so we have adopted one child through the foster care system, and then we're also currently fostering 4 children right now, so right in the thick of it.
I understand that you have some legislation that you are working on for this upcoming legislative session in February. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so we've been the last year working pretty hard on what we're calling a child welfare task force or a child welfare work group. So some delegates and senators have been meeting about every other week and just really doing a deep dive into the system. We realized this wasn't something that we could just focus on for 60 days during session, that this really needed our attention, outside of that. And it's a very complex system, a lot of stakeholders, from department to the judicial to the service providers to foster families. So we wanted to get an understanding from all of those folks, their perspective on what's going right in the system, what's going wrong, and what we can do to help. So, we're looking at about 6,100 kids right now in the care of state custody. But we've got to realize that system is much larger than that, because we're talking about that's a snapshot in time right now, 6,100 kids. When we look outside of that 6,100, that doesn't include children that have been adopted out or children that have been returned to a kinship, relative, or even children that went home. So we've got a much bigger child welfare issue than even 6,100 kids.
Has it been easier or more difficult to procure information about child welfare in West Virginia since the split of DHR?
So it's been a little tough. It's always a little bit tough trying to navigate through government bureaucracy. So some days have been really good. Other days have been a little tough to get accurate information and to get people that want to really help. But I'd say all in all, it's been a successful work group. We've had a lot of collaboration, like I said, from a lot of stakeholders outside as well that have given us a perspective. And so we're moving ahead with several pieces of legislation, and even outside of legislation, we've been able to identify some funding streams that maybe we weren't maximizing on, and we're working on some community efforts that's really outside of government, but just try to bring community in and realize that this is a problem right here in our communities, and how can we step up as individuals, as families, as churches, as nonprofits right in our communities to try to stop this problem here that we've got.
Before I continue the line of questioning I was going on, there's a comment from one of our viewers, Ken Matson, who says, "We were a foster family and adopted our foster one too. I hope they also look into special needs ones as well." Adam, is that also going to be a part of this?
Yeah, so that's exactly it. When we look at kind of start breaking down the system, so you're looking at a really big elephant. Well, how do you eat the elephant one bite at a time? So we've really had to kind of break this thing down and start looking at it individually, because when I looked at it as a whole, I was really overwhelmed. I think everybody is overwhelmed when they look at it and say, how do we fix that? Well, it's a lot of little fixes. It's a lot of little bites. And one of those is the permanency aspect of it. So essentially right now, if a child is returned home to their biological family, they're returned to a relative kinship, or if they're adopted out through the foster care system, a lot of the attention stops right there. It kind of focuses right back on the immediate needs of the system, which is child safety, child well-being. And we've got to make sure that we continue this continuum of care through that permanency process to ensure that those families that are stepping up, that are trying to meet the needs and taking care of those kids, that they're getting all the resources they need. Because you're talking about kids coming in with a lot of trauma, sometimes disabilities, and it's not easy. I can tell you right here on the front lines, it is not easy. So I appreciate the viewer there that commented in. I appreciate what you've done there to try to help, and I do understand it's not easy.
Is there enough money within DHR as it is currently budgeted to take care of these problems? In other words, is there an inefficient use of that money that DHR currently has, or do you need to appropriate more to take care of the needs you're identifying?
Well, I would say initially I think the money is there. We've just got to make sure we're using it wisely. And so, always from an outsider looking in, I think our government can always run a little more efficient, but there's still some needs there that we need to make sure that we're meeting. So it may take some additional appropriations, I would say, on the workforce side. We still have a relatively high vacancy rate within CPS, so we've got to make sure that we're paying our employees, state employees, an appropriate wage for what they're doing. I mean, they're working a lot of times, almost 24/7 on call. They're on the front lines in the middle of the thick of this. They're seeing a lot of trauma. They're dealing with a lot of things that we have to make sure they're being properly compensated for, and that they've got the support that they need. But there's also some additional funding streams that we've got to maximize on through the federal government. Federally, we can get federal matching funds, and sometimes those are up to 75-80% matching funds. So the state's only going to have to put out 20 to 25%. So we've got to make sure those programs are properly written so that they get that maximum amount of federal funds coming in.
Adam, this is Mike. I've heard you speak on this before, that sometimes it's not really about passing new bills or passing new laws to fix this problem, but it's actually working on policy with the agency. Can you speak to how that has changed and how you identified that?
Yeah, so I've actually been traveling the country, meeting with experts from a national level, meeting with different states, just trying to get a handle on it. So West Virginia is actually the worst in the nation in removing kids per capita. So we are first in that, and we are actually more than double the second place state. So that tells me we've got a major problem here. So I just wanted to try to, like I said, do a deep dive into it. I wanted to know what other states were doing, and what I really came to realize was we have pretty decent policy here in West Virginia. We have pretty decent code and things that we're doing, but it's just not effectively being kind of transferred down to the ground level. When you talk about high caseloads with that vacancy rate, you're talking about CPS workers carrying 40, 50, 60 cases. Split that out in a day, and you soon realize it's hard for them to get their eyes on the kids and do their job effectively when they just don't have the support around them to do it. So we also have identified that at times there were outdated policies being used, so there's kind of a lack of training. But again, I think that comes from workforce shortage. We get somebody on, and we got to go right into the thick of it. We got to go fight fire because we got problems. So it's effective training on new and updated policies, and then just ensuring that the culture from the top down, brings that those new policies into effect, and is making sure we're being, that we're following them. And then I think the other thing that we've really got to do is we've got to be transparent and accountable to what we're doing. We are human, and everybody in this system is making human decisions. And sometimes, most of the time they're going to get it right. Sometimes they're going to get it wrong. We got to learn from that. We can't hide from that. We can't try to cover it up. We need to be out on the front and say, you know what? A human made a poor choice here. We're investigating, and we're going to make the appropriate changes that this never happens again. So I think that's bringing that a better culture in there of accountability and transparency as well.
So, Adam, when you with 6,200 kids in the foster care system, you say we're worst in removing kids. Are you saying that there probably should be more kids being removed from these situations?
Well, that's a really tough question. And so when you talk to folks, I can bring you in a whole list of folks that say my kids were removed and shouldn't have been, that there was a poor investigation and they took my kids. And then on the other side, I've got a whole list of folks saying we need to be removing more kids. We're leaving kids in dangerous situations. And what you got to realize, and I think everybody knows it, but somewhere probably between 80 and 90% of our cases are all drug abuse related, substance use disorder related. So I can't necessarily say we need to be removing more kids. We need to ensure that we are getting all of our investigations done and looking after kids and appropriately removing those that are not in a safe condition as well. Doing those proper and thorough investigations will ensure we're not removing kids that can be maintained in their current home. And so that's another one of our kind of bites of the elephant is prevention services. How do we get out on the front of it? We can't just worry about fixing the system. We can't just worry about post-permanency and those services. Is how do we start reducing that number on the front end, that 6,100? And so we've got to start with community, family-oriented prevention services, what we would call wraparound services. This is in-home services, meeting the needs, meeting with the family on a regular basis, and doing our best, trying to keep the families together as long as the kids are safe. So that's always the balancing act is how can we keep a family intact together and ensure safety? Because we cannot have children dying when there's something that we could do. I know we've all been on the forefront of some of the investigations and some of the just terrible incidents that happened this year with fatalities, and we just cannot have that. We've got to prevent that.
Adam, excuse me, Adam, this is John Gilstrap. Good morning. I've been
Good morning.
Looking forward to talking to you again since I was on a long drive and I was listening to Vivek Ramaswamy's podcast. And he had, unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the author, but he's written a book about the foster care system in America. And he, the author, had grown up in the foster care system in California. And he dropped kind of a bomb that I found really startling, that in the California system, he says, there's a deliberate effort to keep the kids circulating from foster home to foster home, specifically to prevent them from developing too strong a bond with the foster family in case the bio family comes back into their lives because they don't want to get in the way of that relationship reforming. Does that resonate as true here in West Virginia?
No, I don't. I would not say that is an accurate statement here in West Virginia, and that's not something that I support. So we'll look at the West Virginia system and say Plan A is always to get kids back home. How can we get them safely back home and ensure that they're going to be safe and healthy in that home? And so that's always Plan A. Well, what any system, and what I would tell national folks from any state is you need to go ahead and start working on Plan B, because there's a probability that Plan A is not going to work. I mean, if we're already at this situation where kids have been removed, that there's just a high probability that those kids may not be going home. So what's Plan B? And so Plan B is we get that child to a permanent place of where permanent's going to be if Plan A fails as quick as possible. So I would say that instance in California is very, very traumatic. And if I haven't read that book, but if you talk to kids that are going through that, that is not a healthy environment for kids. And I understand what they're saying, because as a foster parent, we do. We tend to grow pretty fond of the kids in our care when you're feeding them, bathing them up all night, taking care of them, and spending a lot of time with them. I mean, it's just a natural instinct as a mom and a dad to begin to love the kids that are in your home. And but we need to foster that and make sure that, hey, if Plan A doesn't work, Plan A is already in motion, and we're already building these bonds. So, because what you have to realize is there is a very high probability when those kids get moved from home to home. I mean, studies are out there showing high rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, and even beyond that, high rates of incarceration when those kids come out of the foster care system. When you're traumatizing them from home to home to home, they don't begin to bond with anybody, and it just really leads to an adulthood full of problems.
Is there a time frame where a parent has, by default, aged out or given up practical rights to the child? I mean, if a child is in foster care for, pick a number, 5 years, and which is functionally at least half of a kid's life, can the parents then come back in and reclaim the parental rights? Because as far as the kid is concerned, in all likelihood, they don't even know who they are anymore.
Yeah, so that's not. No, I'm going to say that's not really what's going to happen. So West Virginia is really high on the national level when we compare to other states on quickness to permanency, and so we really are looking at trying to get permanency under 2 years, and so there's kind of two avenues that we're working here. You know, initially we start out through the CPS system, through the Department of Human Services, but when you start talking about permanency, parental rights being terminated, that's all through the court system. And so every judge, every circuit's going to handle things just a little bit different. But essentially, they're going to work through a timeline and give them a 6-month improvement period for that biological family. And after that initial 6 months, if things are not moving in a positive direction, they'll begin to move more toward a termination phase. Now, sometimes you get to that 6-month period and you say, okay, we're moving in the right direction. We're not there yet. Let's do another 6-month improvement period. And so that's probably the more common, and I'm going to say from my personal experience, that's a little more common, is you start to understand and know permanency really between 6 months and 12 months. Now, my wife and I, we mainly do younger children, and so things normally go just a little different with younger kids because, as you talked about, sometimes those kids have never met their families. They're not bonded with them. They've been more of their life with a foster family. So I do think the judges, and not meaning to speak for them or the judicial system, but they'll slow things down a little bit when we're talking about a 10-year-old child, a 13-year-old child that has bonded with a mom and a dad for a long period of time. They'll extend that thing out for a little bit longer, and you're looking at normally about the 18-month to 24-month time frame.
Adam Burkhammer, our guest here on the program, delegate from the 64th. Michael.
Adam, explain to us what it looks like in West Virginia. We talk about foster families, foster care. Are we talking about homes with a dozen children in them? Are we talking about facilities? Are we talking about individual families having kids, from younger kids all the way up to teenage? What does that look like in West Virginia for those of us that aren't involved in this?
Yeah, so when we really talk about a foster parent, foster family, we're talking about just a regular mom and dad that have opened their home to bring kids in. So for us, as an example, I mean, everybody's got their own bedroom, their own bed, closets, all that, which is all mandated in code for us to have. But we're looking at just bringing kids in; they're part of our family, and so it's not a necessarily a structured facility type. They're just here in the house. They're part of the family, and they can run to the fridge whenever they want to get a snack. They've got their toys. Everybody's playing, and so essentially what we're trying to do is bring some type of normalcy, which is a good family structure, good structure starting with the mom and dad at the top, and let them feel that normal aspect of life. And so most of the time that would be a family can only have upwards of 6 kids, under 6 kids. And you have to get a waiver outside of that to go above 6. So we currently have 7 kids in our home with foster kids and our own biological kids. So we had to go and get a waiver to go above that. We were able to get that waiver because we've got some sibling groups, and we work to always try to keep sibling groups together. But as you did speak about, there are other instances where that setting doesn't work. And so you have other levels of care for kids that cannot function in the family setting. And we do have group homes. Most of them are geared toward the older kids, the teenage range of kids that just cannot function in a normal family setting. And then we can go above that, and we do have to have some residential facilities for those that they can't even function in a group home. And that's more of we would consider almost more like a hospital type stay. So we have those different levels.
What are the percentages, Adam? Do you know the breakdown of percentage-wise, where that's a family, a group home, or a facility?
I don't right off, but it's really high percentage are in foster
family care.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can go on the West Virginia DHHR website. There's a child welfare dashboard, and all of that information is there. It gets updated the month after. So I don't think we've got November's information up there yet. So we're looking at October's information, and it breaks down all of those statistics for the state. And then you can actually click on your county and understand your a snapshot of your county as well on that. But still, what you're going to see is a high percentage of those kids are in a normal foster setting.
Adam Burkhammer, our guest here on the program. Adam, I don't know if you're familiar with the local lady by the name of Valerie Ledford or not, but she wrote a book about an ordeal she went through with a couple of children that she fostered and then adopted, and ultimately, in order to get her son, who was the older of the two siblings that were adopted, in order to get her son the appropriate care he needed, she had to renounce her parental rights for that child in order for that to happen, and in fact to leave the state as well, because the services in the state just weren't there to provide enough care for her child. So there's a lot of layers to this. When you peel back that onion, there are so many little subcategories that go with this as well. I'm sure you're aware, but I'd love to get you in touch with her to hear her story, so that as you continue to construct legislation, you are aware of all the little avenues and roads that are down there.
Yeah, no, I would appreciate that, and her case is not an unfamiliar case. And as we had talked about there just a little bit ago, that continuum of care after adoption, we've really got to enhance that and give folks the resources that they need. And sometimes it's not necessarily that the state doesn't want to. We just don't have those resources in the state, as you
Correct.
mentioned there. So we've got to make sure we've got the appropriate and adequate resources available to all of our communities, all of our constituents, and then that we're supporting that continuum of care for those families. So it's an unfortunate circumstance there, and it just breaks my heart to hear that. But she's not alone in that struggle. So we've definitely got to improve that.
Adam, thanks so much for your time this morning.
All right, appreciate it, guys.